Hello, Culture Gone Bad is back with another thematic episode, which we are super excited about. Drupi, I feel like we live in the times where the best option to survive in contemporary conundrums is to become a victim.
Yeah, to sell yourself as such, not to be one, to identify with one, because we have this idea that you can identify with anything. So if you can, why not identify with victimhood?
So I present you the topic of today, contemporary victimhood.
Yes, the hierarchy of victimhoods.
where you are at the victimhood level?
So from, I don't know, you tell me, I mean, you are half Ukrainian, so you know about it, but the point is this. If I count all my victimhoods, I should be the dream of the wokes. Working class, homosexual. I am the weird.
You're from an island.
The weird dream. I'm short. I'm from an island. I'm short. The dream of the woke mob. But I refuse the narrative of victimhood, and I don't think of myself as victim of anything.
So you're gonna pay your bills.
I pay my bills. I pay my bills, painful as it is. And and I prefer a narrative of victory to a narrative of victimhood.
Narrative of victory, very fascinating. So I think the way I started thinking about it is when you shared all these articles with me about incels.
Yeah.
I have to confess, I had no idea these people even exist. And I started watching these videos, reading articles, and I felt like I went down the rabbit hole of vortex of parallel existence in this world, which I think is very much stimulated by the reality what we live in the digitalized times. Because I think this phenomenon probably existed historically throughout all times, and I can imagine it would always take different forms. But technology, it's such a useful tool in making yourself sort of a victim of isolation, of misunderstanding, of discrimination, because all you need to do is to join some online community while you still haven't even gotten out of bed.
Yeah, so people may not know, we're talking about incels. Incels are a community of straight males online who are, it's the contraction of involuntary celibate. So are men who would like to have a girlfriend and women don't want them, so they are lonely and alone, etc. And they retreat into these online communities full of hate and weird ideas. So in the victimhood spectrum, incels stand at the very right of the spectrum. Okay, so you've got victimhoods in the right and in the left. They are the sort of extreme right victim.
Yeah, and what I understand what is very fascinating. Okay, so I have a pity party of not having sex, not having this affection,
not being wanted. Yeah.
And I also understand what is fascinating about them symbolically. They have ideals of what it takes to become sexually desirable, both for men and women.
Yeah. And
they're almost like cartoonish versions of human identity, because in reality, I understand that it usually has to be very buff, sort of, I would say, very Western male, almost like from, I don't know, sort of 80s aesthetics.
Yeah.
And this is their perception of a desirable male.
So they divide society into hierarchies of desirability, let's say. So the macho man at the top, and then the normies, the majority of society, normal people, and then the unwanted incels who are kept outside, and they perceive themselves as virtuous people, virtuous men, perfect gentlemen, men who could make a woman happy if only women were not as mean as they are by refusing them. So this is what the incels are. What I don't know, you give me your opinion about this. What I think, though, is that we live in a society in which we did a great job, I think, as a society in removing stigma from mental problems. Okay, we don't view mental problems as if anything, people claim mental illnesses just to be,
just to get extra holiday allowance.
Exactly, or just to appear as an advocate. I have been depressed when I was 12, therefore I advocate.
I'm still depressed today.
Yeah, etc. So we did a great job, to the point in which even having or flaunting about your personal problems or challenges, it's desirable in our society. We are not as kind to incels. And here I want to separate the legal side. So when they do things that they shouldn't do, like insulting and killing and beating, or not so much beating, but some incels have become murderers and even mass murderers in America. So I want to separate that side, which I'm not, and I don't want to talk about because it's objectively wrong and condemnable, from the psychological side. We are not very understanding about these people who don't find a place for themselves in society. And I mean, they just become one example of toxic masculinity, and nobody tries to understand if this problem can be cured in a way and can be healed to some extent, at least.
JP, but do you think there's some reason why we don't find a place for women in society? That's the biggest dilemma for me. Do you think, I'm just going to say, and could it be that we're just not making enough of effort? We're not trying to use their potential. We're lazy.
I think what you're saying is partly true, undoubtedly partly true, but also it's grounded on the idea that individuals should only rely upon themselves. But that's not how human societies have functioned so far. Societies in the past, there were no incels, for one of the reasons that the one that you gave me, that technology did not allow communities to form in such a way as they do today. And this is one thing. The second is that the family structure was an obligation in the past. So every man found a woman, every woman found a man. So it was a very rare occurrence not to get married. So there was no, because it was a natural step in life. You didn't need to fall in love to have a project with somebody else. And the other thing is that even people who did not get married in the past had different avenues to live their single life. For instance, priesthood or monks or nuns, etc. So the society had a place for encourage people to get married, found a solution to marriage because it was not so free as it is today. Only based on falling in love. So that eliminated part of the problem. And the other thing is that there was a place for people who did not get married, which usually was religion. Today, in a secular society, we don't have a place for people like that. The only place is, exclusion from social life and in a world driven by success is. And I think this is very distressing for some people. And obviously this does not justify or excuse what they do, because what they do is despicable no matter how you look at it. But I think if we understood that there are reasons for discomfort, even for something so appalling, we could, we did it we do it all the time. Even when you see, I don't know, in Italy recently, there has been a woman murdering her child. I mean, nothing could be worse than that, but we even managed to, we always try to find an explanation, at least. Maybe women should be helped after giving birth, for postnatal depression. Maybe they should be supported. We try to find ways of helping even people who commit despicable actions. I don't think we are doing this to incels. So my point is, we are not helping society, we're making the problem worse.
But again, I don't understand. Like, look, if tomorrow you decide, what, instead of trying to improve, okay, you don't have a partner, right? Fine. But you still can find a way to make a living, you can find hobbies, you can find interests in life. Instead, what you decide to do, go online, find people who tell you, yes, nothing is wrong with you, women are awful, join us and we will offer you salvation. I think this is a very easy, this is a last resistance path to just emphasize what you don't want to make a real effort to actually make something meaningful from your existence.
So I totally agree with you. The point is that what I'm trying to say, it goes hand in hand with what you're saying. I think people like incels should be encouraged to do what you do. Okay. They should be told, no, you work on yourself and you don't start from the assumption that you are the perfect man and women are mean. You make yourself more desirable and approachable and you work on yourself. And so I totally agree with you. I strongly believe in the individual. I also think that for people to make that jump from victimhood to action, maybe they need somebody, not a friend, but somebody qualified to help them exiting the loop of problematic thoughts, exiting the community, exiting the incel community, seeing that there is another way is possible, and try to deconstruct those wrong ideas and maybe encouraging them to do exactly what you're saying. But it's not something that can be only on them, because if they were able to do so, they would have happier lives.
Yeah, but what happens where organizations which offer them help, with extremist terrorist organizations, with some far right.
Not all of them. Most incels are just online persona. They don't really act.
It's neo-Nazis. So essentially organizations which tell them, look, you're miserable, join us and we
have the solution.
We have a solution.
Or at least the explanation.
And this is what I think very fascinating for me. So essentially what you're saying are organizations, or let's say communities, which actually promote maybe, I don't know, let's say gym membership is not approaching these guys saying, guys, how about instead of staying online, you come to our gym, we give you discount, get offline. No, the group who are reaching out to them, I don't know, is it ISIS or whoever is recruiting them? So essentially, this is quite interesting. So in a way, far right, they are much better at segmentation and marketization of their target audiences than our capitalist enterprise. This is what it sounds like to me.
I think so. I think far right is feeding off. The far left does it as well on other things, such as the envy, the class envy, for instance, historically. But the far right is doing it, is feeding off the weakness of certain people. So what I'm saying is, if you want to change this, of course, you have to act against those organizations and those ideas, but also you have to act on an individual level, trying to help these people understand that another way is possible and that these extremist ideas are not necessarily a solution to anything.
Yeah, but for me, it's also like very interesting, and we often discuss this topic, is how they identify, even though they say women are despicable, they still think what solution to all their problems in having a partner. And ironically, I'm sure both you and I know a lot of people who found a partner and it actually didn't work out. So I think it's also very ironic what they have this idea which almost makes them blind, like trying to get there in very fucked up way. I think they get themselves nowhere. And again, it just horrendous what's going on there. And I think some of these organizations, the video we watched, you even have to do a blood test to like confirm your race and your background, like crazy. Like, well,
I mean, to be honest, I did listen to.
You did join?
No, I did not join, but I did listen to some interviews of incels, and some of them were really sad stories. They are not extremists or anything. They had appalling ideas about women, but they did not believe in racial, so they were not racist in any possible way. They just hated women because they were unwanted by women, and they thought they were excluded from, from the desirability. But I think this also links to the fact that our society is so obsessed with success that unless you are successful, you feel in an objective way, then you suffer a lot from it. So what I'm saying is,
Sorry.
No, what I'm saying is I strongly, like you, believe in the individual, and I think people should be responsible on an individual level, but society cannot apply this rule only in certain situations. Okay, we do recognize that a lot of other difficult situations require a sort of public intervention of experts, psychologists, and social workers to, you know, to help the people. And this obviously does not change the legal side of it, which remains wrong. But I don't think as a society it's too easy to say toxic masculinity, you are the pits of humanity. That's not a way of solving the problem to me.
And I have another take on this, and I'm very curious to hear what you're going to tell me. Do you think all people in incel community are actually incels and we're actually having this sort of a personal issues with finding a partner? I have a theory. What maybe a lot of people who actually, I don't know how the structure works, but sort of via leaders or via inspirational figures, maybe they actually have none of these issues, but they like to steer people into doing weird shit and like actually reducing their self-worth, self-value to get them to do whatever they want. Because I also think this is sort of a far-right strategy as well. So sort of like reduce your self-identity, self-agency to the point where you can be flipped anyway and can be guided to do anything you want. Because I think this is also how people
this is probably true at an organizational level, but what I was talking about was not the organizational level of the community, because I do think that what you're saying is absolutely the point. Is that if those organizations find a way to operate, is because there are weak people willing to bow to them. So I am saying we should improve the mental health of males who are completely forgotten. Okay, because being a male with mental health problems is a almost a demonstration of lack of machismo in our society, is not as respected as. So I think that we are not acting on that as much, whereas we did an amazing job at improving mental health for, or at least at trying to find solutions for women, gay men, etc. Straight males, I think, are a little bit left. You know, everything they do is because they are intrinsically wrong, and I think this is a double standard in our society. So I do think that you're right. At an organizational level, it is what I feel is that one thing does not mean that we should not act on the other. We should counter, we should oppose, and we should, you know, act on the organizations, but also we should need to make sure that at an individual level, those organizations don't find, you know, followers.
Yeah, and mental health, very fascinating subject, because somehow if you look back, even mid-20th century, it wasn't a big point of conversation. Today, like you said, everyone has a depression to the point they can't even go to work or they can't get out of bed. And it sometimes sounds like, you know, you're doing a live video on TikTok, but you have a mental issue. Like, what's actually going on? Are you a victim or are you victimizing yourself? But mental health really seems to be everywhere, and everyone is suffering in one way or another. And I recently was reading Mark Fisher, and he has a whole, like, he obviously had a mental issue himself. He committed suicide, but he says what his version of the reason why we have such a like horrendous growth of mental issues, like what NHS has records and they're like staggering since sort of early 80s or late 70s. And his theory is what it linked to extreme capitalism and essentially what you're saying, the idea of success. Like you have to have a career, you have to have a car, you have to have a body, you have to have a partner, you have to go on holiday, buy this, do that. And, you know, today with social media, I think it's even becoming more intimidating. And his sort of version that we should blame it on a societal structure, the rise in mental health, and what the problem with how capitalist system is built. And I'm going to be very honest, I'm on the fence with everything he says, but I find it a very interesting sort of thesis to put forward. Do you think we live in extreme capitalism, which pushes us to the edge of our mental stability?
So I do think, first of all, my coming out is this. I do think that capitalism ultimately is a force for good. I know it's controversial, but I do think that the capitalistic nations with capitalism, especially nations where capitalism was somehow tamed by socialism, like European nations, are nations that created a much better world. Rather than societies that banished capitalism because it was bad. That's not what...
Very bad.
Yeah, that's not what in my opinion, the standard of living demonstrates in our Western societies, especially European societies. The life expectancy has improved, the health, the physical health of people has improved. The women have far more rights than in other places. So I don't think it was all for the bad capitalism. I do think, though, that when capitalism, like its opposite, when capitalism is not countered by becomes extreme, you do have those situations. Now, the mental health thing is very fascinating because a couple of years ago, some psychoanalysts proposed this idea that we are not only in a society in which there are psychotic people and, not so much neurotic people like it was at the beginning of this 20th century when Freud wrote his books. We today have a very different mental problems like anorexia, for instance. So very, very different from neurosis, from old-fashioned neurosis. But one thing that we developed is normotics. Now, what are normotics? Normotics are, think of Patrick Bateman,
Oh.
American Psycho. That's a normotic. That's a psychotic that has a type of psychosis that makes him function extremely well in society. So psychosis is not always a hindrance. Sometimes, if you are Patrick Bateman, is the very reason of your success. And there are some facets of personality which are problematic, but if you have them in the right, so let's say proportions, actually help you doing better in society. How could you fire people if you are at the top of an organization? How could you fire people without thinking of the damage you are causing? The only way is if you have a lack of empathy. So in that case, that problem becomes a resource in a capitalistic world.
Yeah, I think the psychopaths function extremely well.
High functioning psychopaths, like the normotics for psychoanalysis. I think it's
in capitalism, we have some special symbiosis. Like,
now,
imagine
incels are not amongst them because they are clearly the opposite, clearly unsuccessful.
Exactly. It's quite fascinating what we identify in here. So there are like levels of psychological disturbance, and on one hand, this makes one level makes you incredibly functional and successful in the system, and then another one like literally puts you on the table.
Yeah, exactly. There's something called balance, probably. Should
I don't know. I feel like you and we're probably in neither of these categories, but I don't know if we have balance.
Yeah, no,
we're just bad. We're just on bad.
I think I found my own balance. Which is not the balance. So incels, I think, are something that is too easy, that should be acted upon on a societal level, etc. But we should, before just, pointing the finger, we should understand if there is something we can do to prevent people from getting to that point.
Yeah, but I think also with our professional interest in academia, I also often think, when we say things to younger people, is there something which we as a society can do or notice? For example, Fyodor Adorno with his Frankfurt School, obviously coming from Germany, he was very much influenced by the reality of Nazism. And he developed this test to identify someone developing early concerning symptoms of fascism and Islam. So maybe our society at the school level.
Also they were very Marxist.
Yeah.
So meaning that their quest was very one-sided.
very one-sided, but I think at the same time, I don't know if you've seen this test. I think it's quite good to sort of see if you have extreme tendencies. And I wonder if what you mean should be almost like at the primary or secondary education level, where you test people with their perception of who is normal in relation to other people who is
normal, but also probably teaching a different set of values.
But their values should be taught, because school, like I'm always very like questionable how many values school teaches, parents teach us, friends, society teaches us, because I think a lot of stuff which we are being taught at like the primary education, secondary education, it's often like almost dysfunctional quite often.
I think also you need balanced parents, which before having balanced kids. And also, as you mentioned, I think weirdly our kids are too protected, therefore they're unable to face certain difficulties as well. So there is a culture of safetyism that does not. And also people are encouraged, as I was saying, to see themselves as victims, because victimhood in our society is currency. The more victimhood you pile up, the more your voice deserves to be heard. We reduce everything to lived experience. So I think that is, an extension of this.
This is super fascinating when you say about things like my parents come from Soviet background, and obviously it was tough, but when I speak to my grandparents, they almost lived like in these barracks, what we call in Soviet. It's like this sort of a wooden ply houses where almost like grew up. It's almost like remains of camps. And they work like 12 hours in a building site, mining, freezing cold. People went through very, very hardcore upbringing. And every time I spoke to them, we never had a mentality to say it was very difficult. I felt like I was a victim. We were like, look, we worked, that was the reality. We did what we could do. And the more I think about my grandparents and previous generations, people went through wars. Like my grandmother brother, he had some of his fingers blown off by a mine, which I think it was during the First World War, when they put them in a like playground area so children would be basically bombed. And no one flinched about it. Everyone was like, you know what? He didn't have fingers. He found a way to just get on.
Yeah.
And I sometimes think that mental capacity to withstand the bullshit in the previous generation was much more robust. And today, I think my generation, they like freak out as very, very basic thing, like, like, oh my God, like the lights are out, like what we're gonna do, like, everyone's talking like, oh, what if Britain's gonna rationalize electricity and energy? And in Soviet Union, in post-Soviet Russia, I remember electricity would be cut off for weeks, water would be cut off for weeks. They just get on. Get on. And I think we somehow miss this, like what you say, like children are super protected, and then some bullshit happens, like you don't even have a capacity to organize yourself.
Absolutely.
Sorry for a very like long.
No, absolutely. I totally agree. And you see this even, there are some studies on how immigrants do in Western countries. And it is pretty consistent that one of the findings that have been noticed is that the first couple of generations, the first and second generation immigrants, complain much less and do much better. And from the third, fourth generation onwards,
they don't know how to brush their teeth.
No, they don't have the same drive, and this is partly, and this doesn't really make sense, because as you say, the first generation and second generation should have more problems in doing well in life, but actually precisely because they went through shit, they are more ready and more equipped, and they encourage their children to do better, and they very often do better. It's the subsequent generations that relax. to some extent, and this drive is, and the rather than working on themselves, they, it's society, etc. So yeah, I think that we are becoming a society as time goes that is less equipped with dealing with uncomfortable things.
I mean, isn't it lucky what Uber Eats and Just Eat are there to facilitate all of it?
Exactly.
And Amazon Prime, you don't even have to leave a house to face the reality. You can work from home.
From home, yeah, you can be an incel at home.
but the reason why we have this culture, like, I'm sorry, but it's because, yes, there are people with issues who don't get help. Yeah, that's a given. But also, our society created this bubble where you literally don't have to go out and, go on a date, face rejection, be heartbroken, go for shit, rebuild yourself, go again.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you go to job, you get fired, you find another one, you find another way to make money. You get fat, you fucking sort out your diet. You go to gym. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm not saying about extreme cases, but average, it's more about taking yourself and trying to figure out simple steps to, get back.
We got to a point where if you are overweight, society tells you that that's okay.
But COVID told us otherwise.
Yeah, but and some associations in America told doctors to change their guidelines because they were fat shaming. No, they were not fat shaming. They were telling you a scientific truth. You can decide to carry on, if you like yourself in any way, you should. Okay, I think you should be allowed to be however you please yourself. Just don't tell doctors not to, give information.
Just don't wait.
We got to a point in which, if we are very understanding with those things, except if straight white males have problems, and then maybe a little bit less. But on average, we got to the point of normalizing certain issues that is creating them rather than solving
I mean, I don't know, I'm just gonna give another, maybe some people find it uncomfortable, but I remember when I was graduated from uni, went to work for some PR companies, assisted some stylists, obviously started in fashion, and English is not my first language. The idea of picking up a phone and calling PR agencies, calling agents, different people all day seems to be, it's intimidating. It's also double intimidating. Like, whoever's going to pick up a phone, on the other hand, first thing we will notice there is an accent.
Yeah.
And I was doing it like 100 calls every day nonstop. And I was working with some British people, and I was like, oh, I don't want to call. Like, I don't want to like take a phone. It's too stressful. I'm like, this is your mother tongue.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna be better at this than I am, but no. Like, the reality is, the person who is better at taking a risk and just making a step, whatever it takes, like even to leave a house, is a person who just have this sort of a capacity of understanding, you know what, in order to get somewhere, I have to make a step.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not about the conditions, sometimes it's about your mental frame of how you perceive the situation you're in. And you're right. It's about, I totally agree, educating specific values, giving examples, but also I think our whole educational system from very beginning, it also should be about practical application in life. I'm not an expert to tell you how this framework should work, but we're definitely lacking some applicable basic social skills even being taught in school sometimes. And I think it is a big issue.
It's not about taught as in teaching maths or history. I don't think that is. I think it's about proposing ideals of success which do not necessarily hinge upon beauty and other types of success. And I think this is actually one of the problems, because today the word ugly has been cancelled. You cannot use the word ugly anymore. You cannot say that somebody is not beautiful. Everybody's beautiful in their own way. One is the 300 kilos beautiful. Everything is beautiful. What's the problem with this? That to me, this obviously everybody should be respected as they are. This does not make them beautiful, though. Now, the point is that for me, this reveals a society, not a more inclusive society, but a society that is so obsessed with beauty that ugliness has been cancelled. And it means that you don't recognize any other value than beauty. Because if you did recognize other values like intelligence and education, you wouldn't need to classify everybody or communicate. You wouldn't need to classify everyone as beautiful. You would say, yeah, it's not beautiful, but it's extremely intelligent. Yeah. This is much more important than beauty. So by canceling ugliness, I think we did a disservice to beauty, because we are just demonstrating that the only one value that we as a society recognizes beauty. That's why we don't.
I think what it also, like, where it takes us next is what we don't live in a society of objective facts. Like, you are doing something with your life, which is juxtapositioning your well-being. We live in a society where you can identify with anything, with any concept, the version of your persona, and that's fine. And I think that what we discussed and read about Meghan Markle,
you can identify as a single child even though you've got siblings.
Exactly. And you can create your whole persona identity, and you can say you're a victim of that, or you've been discriminated and no one cared about you, and it doesn't matter what the facts say, as long as
it doesn't suit your narrative.
Like, we live in a society of creating and constructing narratives, and unfortunately social media became also a perfect tool on that, because we all know, like, whatever we see on social media, it's just like a version which is very curated of what we
Instagram filters making everybody pretty.
But it's subjective prettiness. Like, it's something which is social acceptable, doesn't mean it's really aesthetically purely stimulating or sophisticated. And I think this is scary, because we don't even care about objective truth in regards to things which matter. We live in a society which we pursue the easiest ways to identify or join a community or become a victim of one thing or another in order to survive or do better in life. And I think that's a problem.
I think that's it. We murdered truth. We murdered the truth with the capital T in order for small truths with non-capital T, to emerge. Everybody has their own truth, which is a problem now. People may not know this, but that we were referring to Meghan Markle because she declared that she grew up as a single child, and all of a sudden her sister said, no, actually, you're not a single child. You had a sister. I was there. And she said something like, yes, but I felt like an only child. So what you feel changes the reality around you, or allows you to retell the truth. Now, this radical postmodern descent into relativism, I think it's dangerous, because then it becomes, even the incel thing becomes acceptable, because they do perceive themselves as victims of a society. So then if it's true for Meghan Markle, then it needs to be true for the others. And no, we should hold on to truth in some ways.
But it's like going around and again doing all these charitable things, and then being called out for having this lavish party and saying, but I do care about this, but it's all for the greater cause. And it's because you identify with the greater cause. Suddenly nothing else matters.
She flies private jet, but then she cares about the environment. She lectures us about the environment. In fact, she's been equated to Donald Trump. And I think that was the funniest thing, because no two people could be farther apart than Meghan Markle and Donald Trump. And yet they both believe in alternative facts. So that was an interesting thing that has been noticed this week.
Yeah, fascinating. Speaking of alternative choices, I went to Dover Street Market recently.
What?
Dover Street Market. You know what? Everyone should go to Dover Street Market. Not in advertising, but we always give lots of free foods and snacks on the weekend.
Really?
Yeah, very nice. But anyway, I was checking out some clothes, and mini skirts, super mini, very short.
Yeah, we've got Miuccia to thank.
Yeah, very, very short skirt. I'm not sure, like, I don't know, it doesn't aesthetically appeal to me, like, I would just put it this way. But the reason why I mentioned it, it reminded me of another news story which caught our attention. So I understand it was an American journalist.
Yeah.
Who was reporting on the execution of prisoner.
Yeah.
And she was not allowed in the...
She was not allowed because she was wearing a skirt that was too short. It was unacceptably short. And then the tragedy became a farce because she was asked to wear some other garments, and she ended up looking even more ridiculous than with a miniskirt, because I think they put some technical clothes on her, something else. So they asked her if she wanted to enter the room to dress in a different way. Now, the funny thing is that obviously it's a ridiculous story, but and she claimed, the journalist, that this was a sexist attack or a sexist decision. And I don't see how this is sexist, really, because this would never have happened to a man, for the simple fact that men do not go to executions in hot pants or in miniskirts. In other words, what allows society to tell women not to wear certain thing is a side effect of the greater freedom that women have in choosing their clothes. For instance, in parliaments, in the Italian parliament, I think it's the same in Britain, you have very strict rules for men, but not for women. Women have many more options. For instance, women can wear short sleeves, men cannot. They have to wear a blazer. So the lesser freedom of men makes it possible for them to fail less, just because they're less free to operate.
Comes in south.
Whereas, so this is not sexism. This is just you are taking advantage of the freedom that you have in choosing how to dress, and because you're taking advantage of your freedom, you have some limitations. If I went there dressed as I'm dressed today with hot pants, I'm pretty sure that they would stop me as well, with reason.
Well, I mean, I wonder what we would do if I would be a man in Prada miniskirt, and I would tell him it's inappropriate for a man to be dressed like this as execution, and he would be like, but I identify as a woman.
Yes, and they would say, and if you're a woman, you wouldn't be. The problem is not the miniskirt. The problem is the amount of skin that you are showing, and it's for an execution was not considered. We can discuss on the fact that it's appropriate. Maybe we think that at least the last thing that the prisoner says is a pair of legs, and maybe the prisoner is happy. I don't know. There could also be.
I mean, depends what he says.
Exactly.
I mean, depends how short skirt is.
Yeah, but the point is, I don't see any double standard here. I see this not as an attack on her as a woman, but just an attack on a specific choice that you made because you had more options. Because fashion is female, and women have so many more, luckily for women, so many more options than men do in terms of clothes.
So we have a persona who had a good option recently coming his way, Johnny Depp.
Oh yeah.
After rebuilding back his reputation of winning the court case, his advertising deal, which I think was about to even be pulled off, was renewed for Dior Savage perfume.
Yeah.
And now it's the most successful perfume ever. Right? Not maybe ever, but they're super successful right now.
Yes.
And I find it very fascinating because I think on one hand, the whole idea of Savage perfume, it's very much like this marketing of, I read it like animalistic, wild,
macho exactly.
identity.
Exactly.
And then also Johnny Depp being the figure who obviously sort of a slap in the face of Me Too movement. I think it's quite ironic, and it tells us what...
And of fluidity as well.
Yeah. I think it tells us an idea what the more sort of identities you put upon yourselves, the more you play this victimhood game. So all lies eventually they resurface. And the reality comes...
I think in terms of Instagram success, you may be successful as a victim. It's not very successful in terms of marketing, in terms of selling things, because this is the demonstration that companies cannot really lecture their own clients, because once you give them a choice, they will always opt for the choice they want. They don't opt for the choice that is more politically correct necessarily. They verge towards where they believe, that they buy according to their system of values, which as a brand you cannot necessarily change in a vertical way. So the success of that is, I don't know if it's very fair to read the Johnny Depp as a slap to the Me Too movement, because I think that ultimately that was their own story. And apparently they were both abusive, him to her, her to him. So this is a success for no one, neither for the Me Too nor for the opposition to the Me Too. But it does show that in his case, his fame just grew.
Yeah.
Rather than being diminished. And one of the reasons why his fame has increased is because he proposes a narrative of victory, not a narrative of victimhood, which is something that we became so unaccustomed to that now it looks original and new and different.
But nothing is ever new. We live in a perpetual loop of nostalgia.
Exactly. We perceive it as new. But if this has worked for Johnny Depp and Sauvage, be pretty sure that some other brands will take this idea and make it work for different products, because, as you say, nothing is new. It's the ever-changing world.
Well, we shall see how bad the culture goes. Till next time.
Till next time.